Hey everyone, Warwick's here. Happy Dragonflight, everyone. Today we're going to be starting the first of the four class guides that I'll be doing for patch 10.0 as we look at the Druid class, my main for World of Warcraft Dragonflight. I will be doing some other specs as well as we get into this, as I get them leveled and I kind of experience a few things. And even on the Druid class, I got to do some research on some of the most up-to-date information. Today we're going to start, as you can tell, with Guardian Druid. I know I've done a lot of Guardian Druid videos on this channel, but it is my favorite spec in the game, even though I'll be a DPS in Raid. But what we're going to be doing today is going over everything you need to get started with Guardian Druid in Dragonflight. We're going to look at a couple of different talent builds for both Mythic Plus and Raid, and then we're also going to be talking about some of the other things that you're going to need. Things like obviously your stats. We're going to be looking at your rotation. Consumables we're still kind of up in the air about right now. There are some that I think are going to be pretty solid, but I need to do more work on those. So eventually I will be pinning the comment I make that will kind of update the uh, actual like consumables that you want in terms of gems and chants and things of that nature. And we're just going to kind of nerd out a little bit about Guardian Druid to help you get started in Dragonflight. So let's first start, of course, with the talent build. Now, this has kind of been a leveling build that I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete everything. And so for talent builds, there's a little bit of variation between Mythic Plus and Raid, depending on what your group needs. The non-negotiables to me are going to be on the first row are these talents here. I would even say maybe improve bark skin at the very least is probably also there, just because there's synergy with other talents. Now we need 2 more points. Now there's a couple of ways. Actually, I wouldn't even say it's a non-negotiable. It is negotiable. But we need 3 more points. So depending on the content for Raid, I would say come down the Moonkin form and come down and get this to open up the first gate, because you're not going to necessarily need a remove corruption. There's going to be plenty of healers that can also go ahead and remove the curse and poison effects on you. In Mythic Plus, if you don't have another curse to spell, you're not running with, say, like a mage or a shaman, for example, and you need to be the curse to spell, then coming down here and grabbing these 3 talents will. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to unlock the raid side, but just take note that these 3 talents could be very important from the Mythic Plus standpoint. All right. And then, of course, our other non-negotiables to me are Thick Hide, Skull Bash for Mythic Plus. I would even say for Raid, because a lot of DPS are not going to take their interrupt point in favor of better points. And then I'm going to say also grab Matted Fur, just because it unlocks this side of the tree. Getting, for me right now, it's about a 16.5k absorb shield. It's not the end of days. It's maybe a couple of hits, white hits from mobs. But you need it to open up this part of the tree, which does have a couple of talents that I think are pretty important. I'm a big fan of grabbing Wild Charge. It's free. You might as well get it here. I know some people skip the talent point in Mythic Plus because they don't feel like they need the mobility. Personally, I'm a big fan of the mobility. So this point I think is negotiable depending on your preferences. I prefer Wild Charge. I think in Raid it's going to be pretty important, because if you're swapping off to go get Wrangle Up the Mobs or something like that, I think it's there. But in Mythic Plus, where everything's running at kind of your pace, I don't think you need it. I personally like it just because, again, I love the mobility. We're going to grab Soothe, and we're going to grab Stampeding Roar because we need it to get down to Lakar's teachings. And then again, we have 5 more points to spend here. Now, you can come in and grab something like, if you go down the restoration tree because you're the curse to spell, you can grab things like Natural Recovery and Wild Growth just to give you a little bit of off healing, to where, like, say, after a pull, if your group's a little bit down, you can, shift out Wild Growth, rejuice Swiftman, regrow somebody, and then you're also getting additional healing taken, which is always going to help your healer out. The less heals they have to spend on you, the better off your mana is going to be. And I think this also impacts things like your Moonfire growth after the Wildfire, which we'll talk about in a little bit, as well as your Frenzied regen. So this is a pretty decent investment of 2 points. This here, Nurturing Instinct, with Moonfire being a less of an important source of our damage, I think these points are optional. And in raid situations, I definitely want to grab Astral Influence to get the extra 3 yards. This is going to help you be able to wrangle up mobs a little bit better. I even think in Mythic Plus, it's worth coming down and getting this. Like, you go grab these 3 points, and then you come grab these 5. Even if you do just that, I think you're going to be fine. All right. From here, there's a couple of different versions. I think in Mythic Plus, you're going to start grabbing your utility. You grab Hibernate. You want to grab Typhoon. And then maybe even go start grabbing the bark skin for these 3 points here to max it out. I think improved bark skin is actually a pretty strong talent point, making your bark skin go from a baseline 8 seconds to upwards. I think it's baseline 8 or 10, and then you grab this, makes it 14. With a talent like Brambles, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, it just makes bark skin a pretty effective button to push almost at all times. But I'm going to go ahead and grab these because we're again kind of looking at a non-curse dispel mythic plus / raid build. And then we're going to come grab Incap Roar. I think in raid you can grab Mighty Bash if you don't need a mass stun. Both of these points I think are interchangeable. So I'm going to grab Incap Roar. And then I'm also going to go ahead and grab the 3 points in Lucario's Teachings. Obviously getting 6% more versatility while you're in bear form. Never a bad thing. And then I'm going to go ahead and put at least 1 point in Well-Honed Instincts to grab this. I'm also going to grab Renewal because getting a 1.5 minute, I think it's off the GCD heal, that heals you for 30% of your health. Very valuable as a tank. Anything you can do to sustain yourself even more is never a bad thing to have. And then these last 5 points I think are pretty negotiable. You can do a 2nd point into Well-Honed Instincts to grab that and make it only every 90 seconds versus every 2 minutes. I'm not sure a 30-second reduction is worth the 2nd point investment. I'm a big fan of Minute Roar. I like getting Stampeding Roar cooldown, but that obviously is negotiable. Heart of the Wild you can grab because it, you can pop it and then shift back into bear form if you don't get insta-gibbed, and you get Moonfire damage being 30% more valuable. And there are going to be situations in raid in particular where you're off tanking or something like that, where you can shift into a balance form, or you can do the kitty weaving style if you'd like. Or you can pop out and, do a little bit of extra healing to help you group out. It's very versatile. I think in Raid, you're probably going to take this for off-taking purposes, but in Mythic Plus, I just don't see a value in it. Although, again, it can be very good depending on some bosses where mechanics don't allow you to be actively having to tank because you're avoiding a mechanic or you're running out of something. Pop Heart of the Wild, use your balance form stuff, and you get, use your Alkin weaving, so to speak, and you're going to get a little bit of value. So I think there is some there. I need to know more about I need to get more and more comfortable with the encounters and what I can and can't do in them to be able to say that this point to me is non-negotiable in Mythic Plus. But I think in Raid, it is valuable. You can also go to something like, if you go down this path because you are the corrupt spell, you grab this and then you come grab Ursal's Vortex. I'm going to grab Sunfire for the purposes of this, just to show down the tree. Sunfire, it's a point you have to spend, but it's kind of useless overall. I'm going to grab Ursal's Vortex for the mob control again, because if you're pugging in particular, having a single target CC, a displacement tool, an AoE stun, and mob control to get mobs off of you or to keep them in one place to avoid mobs running away, whatever the case may be, makes it so that you're very valuable. Very valuable as a pug tank because you can basically do a majority of it on your own. And again, the last 3 points I think are completely negotiable. Innervate, I think in Mythic Plus, it really depends on your healer, but Innervate takes you out of form in order to be able to cast it right now, because for some reason, they still haven't added it to Ursine Adept. So this is going to be a little bit risky in Mythic Plus. In Raid, I think it's very useful because, again, when you're not actively tanking, you just quickly pop Innervate on the healer that needs it and go to town. And Nature's Vigil, I think, has limited value for Bear because while you do have some hard-hitting single-target things in Maul and Mangle in particular, getting 30 seconds on a minute off of healing, like, it could be useful if you pop it on cooldown all the time, just to do that little bit of extra off-healing along with some of the other healing stuff that you're doing. Like, there's definitely some valuable points there. You can also come back in and just put them in Nurturing Instinct if you don't want any of these talents. Put the final 3 points there, get 6% more damage on your Moonfire. Never a bad thing. So I think you got options. You can even go Verdant Heart. I don't think Verdant Heart is needed until you start pushing really, really high keys where you maybe want to sacrifice the damage for surviving. So maybe you'd pull a point out of here to put it into Verdant Heart if you went that route. There's definitely a variety of ways to kind of finalize the build. Some people will be like, oh, Ursine Vigor, why wouldn't you use that? I think Ursine Vigor may have some value in Raid, but it's going to be very, very niche. I just don't see it, and it's not going to have any value at all in Mythic Plus. Like, with the changes that have been made to Bear, getting the health and armor increase for 4 seconds after you enter form when you don't have an Iron Fur is less valuable because of some other cooldowns that have been introduced into the Guardian tree. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and do the points that I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and put the points here. just for my purposes. But again, these points are flexible depending on playstyle. And then even like, again, if you are the Curse Dispel, you can even go this route right here, which I think I'm going to do for now, just to give a little bit more flexibility to my group. Because right now I'm running double Evoker, Shaman, and Enchantment Shaman, and Shadow Priest in my Mythic Zero World Tour group. So having a Curse Dispel may not be a bad thing depending on what dungeon we're doing. Right. On the Guardian side of the tree, these points right here are non-negotiable. I think Brambles over Bristling Fir. Bristling Fir is just very... it's very bad right now. And even though you have plenty of room for buttons, I just don't think this is one that you want to use, considering Brambles is going to allow you to, give you a small absorb plus reflecting the damage. And they're also just passively doing damage. So you get 8-second Bark Skin, plus now you're getting 12 seconds. And then if you grab this, you can do something like 14 seconds worth of Bark Skin. That's 14 seconds of 20% DR plus damage back. Brambles is just one of the best talents in the tree because of other talent synergies it has with it. Of course, you're going to grab Berserk Ravage, and then you're going to grab Gory Fur. These are these are the first 8 points are all non-negotiable. Now, from here, I think this is where the build can start to get, I think, Survival of the Fittest and After the Wildfire are both non-negotiables. Guardian of Elune, has potential, but it's just being overshadowed right now by After the Wildfire, where, I'm doing a 36k heal to allies within 15 yards of me. So in a raid situation, this is basically, unless you're just, the hitbox of the boss is very big. For the most part, your raid melee group is going to be standing pretty close to you. I mean, you generally within 15 yards, especially in any situations where you're stacking. You can game this with weak auras and stuff like that if you want, but for the most part, you can just spend your rage freely, and this is going to have some value. It's going to do a lot of overhealing, but I would rather it do overhealing and potentially help out a healer versus having no value at all. And then we're also going to grab Berserk Persistence because we need to get down this side of the tree. It is vitally important. All right. On this side of the tree, I think we grab Vulnerable Flesh and we grab Tooth and Claw. And then, of course, we grab Fury of Nature. I think these points all have value here. And then from here, you have some options. I think for raid builds, you go grab Soul of the Forest and Vicious Cycle. I think these are 2 points that you can grab that'll potentially help you out. And then you can also grab Berserk to Uncheck Aggression. Because Layered Mane, even though it got a small buff, doesn't do enough. Reinforced Fur got a small buff, doesn't do enough. And Flashing Claws Thrash is not as huge a part of your rotation anymore as it used to be in Shadowlands and previous expansions. So Flashing Claws does have a little bit lesser value. 1 point for a Mythic Plus build I think is fine, but you do have to spend a point in Innate Resolve. More healing when you regrowth or Frenzied Regen yourself and giving you the extra charge of Frenzied Regen. Potentially very good, but I just, I would say grab this for safety if you want to grab a point in Flashing Claws. But I think for raid builds, you can safely ignore these because you're going to have potentially up to 4, maybe even 5 healers spamming you with heals. So for raid builds, I'd say skip it. I think Myth Plus builds, you could probably stick a point in here and sacrifice the point in Unchecked Aggression. So let's talk about, if I were looking at this from a Mythic Plus perspective, I'm going to put a point here, and then I need one more. I'm going to put it in Ursoc's Endurance, giving me the additional Bark Skin and Iron for duration, which just helps your general defensive purposes. Really strong talent. I think this buff to it made a massive, massive difference. And then we grab everything on this side of the tree. So this obviously gives you, 10% DR just passively for having Moonfire up, which you should have it up on as many targets as possible. Twin Moonfire gives you extra damage, and of course the hitting of the second target, so it makes it easier to spread Moonfire. Even in raid build, I would grab this just because it's increased damage. Essentially passive rage gen through Thrash. Never a bad thing. You're going to have a lot of rage to spend by using this build. And then Rage of the Sleeper got a buff recently to give it a shortened cooldown of 1 minute and also give you 25% leech and 15% increased damage. This is now a massive cooldown, and it reflects back damage as well, as it has always done. So this is now a massive cooldown that you're going to want to use basically on CD as you get it. To finish out your final 4 points, you come down the middle of the tree, Circle of Life and Death, giving you more dot ticks on your Thrash, which means more rage, more dot ticks on your Moonfire, which means more healing, because you are healed for 30% of all arcane damage done. This is for the initial hit and for every Moonfire tick, so a little bit of consistent small drips of healing. This is going to scale well as we get higher and do more and more damage. So anytime you can make your dots tick faster, which means more healing, never going to be a bad thing. Incarn is still very good, getting that 30% health buff and also grabbing a 3 target mangle during the cooldown is very good. And then you want to grab Urslog's Guidance because it every 20 rage you spend. So basically with this build, every time you slap Iron Fur, you're reducing the cooldown of Urslog's by 1 second. And then even outside of the cooldown, that's 40 rage you're spending on an Iron Fur. That's 2 seconds pulled off of your Incarn cooldown. This makes Incarn from a 3-minute cooldown to roughly 1 to 2 minutes, depending on how much rage you spend. So very, very, if you're taking Incarn, this talent is almost absolutely 100% required to go with it. So I think generally this is kind of the Mythic Plus build I would take. I would probably take this point and put it down into Vicious Cycle. If a raid, I'd even take these 2 points, put them into Vicious Cycle, into Unchecked Aggression. I think those are going to be valuable points. There is a chance you could drop something like Blood Frenzy for Soul of the Forest, because Mangle is going to be an important part of your rotation. But for the most part, I think this build is a pretty safe one to take for all content. And then you can specialize 1 or 2 points as you need to for single target / raid type purposes. And then again, this build I think is going to be pretty safe. Again, with some points to spend, you can grab Innervate, you can grab Nature's Vigil, you can grab Heart of the Wild, you can grab Minute Roar, you can grab a second point in Well-Honed Instincts. All of these have value inside of your Mythic Plus. For raid, you probably can drop these 2 points in particular just to give you more flexibility in your talent points. You could probably drop these 3 points as well for raid purposes. This is kind of a more Mythic Plus setup, but each of these are going to be really good. I'll link the raid build I would most likely go with in the description below. So this will be for Mythic Plus, and I'll link the raid build in the description. Actually, I'll link both in the description just so you guys have them. So I'm going to go ahead and apply these changes, and we'll move on. So we spent 15 minutes talking about talents. Apologies. All right. Now, I don't know where these training dummies are out here, but we could talk about kind of the general approach to your rotation. So your rotation is going to be on the opener. You're going to want to Thrash first and then Mangle because of this talent here. Mangle does 20% damage against bleeding targets. So you always want to lead with a Thrash before you Mangle anything, because it's just going to allow you to get that extra damage on Mangle. And then you're going to want to Moonfire spread as much as possible. Hit as many targets, if not all targets, with Moonfire. And then it's basically just keep Mangle and Thrash on cooldown. Moonfire maintained as much as humanly possible. And then you just swipe to fill in the gaps in terms of DPS. Now, with Tooth and Claw, you do want to maul on every Tooth and Claw proc, regardless of what you're doing in that time, because it does huge amounts of damage and has DR. This also gives you, in Mythic Plus situations, funnel damage. So if there's a priority target, you can focus that target, do a little bit of funnel damage. In raid situations, you're obviously going to want to use it on cooldown just because it does a lot of damage. At almost 400 eye level, I was having mauls crit for 40, 50k. Right now, I'm only critting for 20k, I think, or so. But I'm only I'm 339 eye level, so I haven't messed with it a little bit in Mythic Plus since grabbing a few upgrades. But Tooth and Claw procs, you're going to want to use all the time. And then if you're off tanking and you don't need to Iron Fur, of course, you're going to Rage Dump Maul even outside of Tooth and Claw procs, just because it's got a lot of value. From a defensive purposes, obviously you want to maintain at least 1 stack of Iron Fur. You never want to maul if you can't maintain your Iron Fur. So if your Iron Fur is only down to 1 or 2 seconds left and you have 45 rage, you're probably just going to want to spend it on Iron Fur to maintain your mitigation versus doing the damage. Even in situations where you may not be taking a lot of damage, it's just good to have that Iron Fur rolling just in case. For defensive tools, you're going to want to use Ursox and Rage of the Sleeper generally in conjunction with each other, because it's just a mass stamina boost as well as then extra leech and stuff like that. So just really works together. But in between Incarn's Rage of the Sleeper on cooldown, it's probably your most important non-Incarn cooldown, because it does do so much with the DR, the increased damage, the leech, and the reflect. You're going to want to use it all the time. After that, Bark Skin becomes your third most important defensive. So if Incarn and Rage are down and you need a defensive, you want to grab Bark Skin. As you can see in my tooltip here on the bottom right corner, it has a 42-second cooldown with Survival of the Fittest. So really short. That's going to be useful to you all the time. And then for final grounds, you want to grab Survival Instincts, which you can see is about a 2-minute cooldown to get a 50% 6-second duration damage reduction. Really good on a 2-minute cooldown when you consider something like Prop Paladin's Guardian of Ancient Kings is a 5-minute cooldown. They have talents that'll be able to reduce that as well, but still, basically, for a talent you're basically always taking because of After the Wildfire, getting a 50% DR on a 2-minute cooldown is pretty potent stuff. So you have basically a tool for everything that you want to do when it comes to this. So you have strong defensives in your 4 defensive cooldowns. You have good regeneration in Frenzied Regen, as well as Renewal, as well as your ticking Moonfire damage. And then you also have Well-Honed Instincts to help you at low health. So you have a lot of really good sustain options. You have really good defensive tools. And the damage of Guardian Druid, with that 50% aura buff, is actually quite in line with all the other tanks. I think it's even on the upper echelon of tank damage. So, again, no training dummies to necessarily practice it on. I'll show you this little stag beetle. So you just want to come in. Obviously, I'm just absolutely exploding them. But you saw I just wanted to get the thrash. Just wanted to be able to get the thrash off so that you can kind of see just exactly how that would function. You'd almost immediately follow up with Mangle. Now, once we get our tier piece bonus, let me see if I can grab, let's see, tier sets, vaults of the Incarnate. All right, well, let's come grab this real quick. Let's do Druid. So as you can see, for Guardian, the 2-piece, basically when you use Mangle on your Gore procs, it deals even more damage. And it also cleaves out, which makes so that your Gore procs outside of Incarn now also make Mangle hit multiple targets. Very, very good. It also increases your damage center, reduces damage take by 5% when you use those Gore Mangle procs. So we're talking another DR. So you're getting 10% on Moonfire having out. These give you 6 seconds of 5% DR. You're getting 6 seconds of 15% DR on Tooth and Claw. And then you have a 20% cooldown in Barkskin, 25% in Rage of the Sleeper, 50% in Survival Instincts. You can reduce a ton of damage with this spec. And then on a 4-piece bonus, Gore basically has an increased chance to trigger. We always love that, which synergizes with your 2-piece. And also Mangle heals you, gives you a big healing over time. It actually does quite a bit of healing. After the Wildfire got a small nerf. It was actually like after the Wildfire was something like 30% of my healing, and then this tier bonus was 20% of my healing. So it does a lot of healing when you get your 4-piece bonus. So the Guardian Druid tier piece this round, even though it's very vanilla, very bland, it is very good. And it just makes it so that when you have the 4-piece bonus, Mangle becomes your most important thing to use. Something small rotationally to think about. If there are more than 5 targets out, you're going to want to... So like if you're doing a big pull right off the bat with Incarn, you're going to want to spam Thrash. Just because Thrash is, generally speaking, has a lower soft cap than Mangle does. Mangle, obviously, with the 4-piece bonus, clears out to reduce damage beyond 5 targets. So at 5 targets, it's doing the most damage. When you have less than 5 targets, to say the pull starts to go down, like say you have a bunch of small, like Shore Runner type mobs from Gambit, for example, which there are some in the dungeons that I've done and experienced. Once those mobs start to slow down and you're still in your Incarn, you want to switch off of Thrash and start going into Mangle at 5 targets or less when you have your 4-piece bonus. So that won't come until the raid releases, so it'll be mid to late December into next year, January timeframe for most people to have that. But I want to go ahead and put that out now just so that you have that on your forefront. As far as stat goes, haste is going to be your overall best stat. Eye level still ultimately is going to be king if a piece of gear is, I think it's 10 or 15 eye levels higher than what you're currently wearing. It doesn't matter what stats are on it. It is going to be better just simply because of the raw agility and stamina buffs that you're going to get out of it. To give you an idea, I sit right now in bear form at 279,000 health. When I was at Island level 300 at the end of Shadowlands and I went into bear form, I had like 110k, I think. So my health is more than doubled, and I'm only gone up 29 eye levels. Like, just to give you an idea of stamina scaling. But haste, of course, increases attack speed, which means more tooth and claw procs because that procs off of your auto attacks. Energy regeneration, not a matter here. But we do have a couple items that are hasted effects. So Mangle's a hasted cooldown. Thrash is a hasted cooldown. So the more haste that you can have, the faster that you're going to come off of cooldown. Haste also impacts your dot ticking. So Thrash dots as well as your Moonfire dots. Haste is just a really good stat. It has really good, strong offensive benefits and has good defensive benefits as well. And then versatility and mastery are going to be pretty equal to each other. Of course, here you get more health and healing received, but you also get more attack power. So mastery is a fine stat. I'd say it's probably third if you really want to be that picky about it. And versatility, of course, your second best stat overall. Anytime you can reduce the damage that you're taking, it's good. So as you can see, another 5% at my 10% verse that I have right now, or 4.77 rather, at my current stats. So go from there. Consumables, I'd say it kind of depends on where your stats are at. I think verse is probably safe until you get around the 20% mark for any enchants that you want, like ring enchants. Consumables, like I said, we'll do more work on those. I think there's still some play to be done with it before we get there. Let me just double check to see the updated math, so to speak. See if there's been any updates on it. Oh, there has been updates on it. Cool. So let me go ahead and pull this over for you. This is from the Wildhood Guide. And I trust pumps. So Sophic Devotion basically gives you a chance to get agility. We love that. On your cloak, speed. I'm a big fan of movement speed. Of course, you have to get this from Valdrakken Accord if you're an enchanter. I'm a big fan of movement speed. I think movement speed for Bear Druid is actually really, really important. For Feral, it's less so because you get an inherent movement speed bonus. So something like Leech is going to be good, and same for like Resto. Leech is going to be good. You get Waking stats, which is the sacred stats of this expansion. Bracers, now instead of Shaded Hearthing, you're going to get a speed enchant, which is never a bad thing. You can put a Fierce Armor Kit on your legs to give you stamina and agility. Watcher's Loom gives you stamina boost, so always want that. And then Rings, Devotion, and Versatility from there. Combat Potions, Ultimate Potion of Power, I think is always going to be there. Of course, Bottled Putrescence can be a viable alternative, but I think Ultimate Power is never a bad idea. Just getting a huge amount of agility is always going to be a good thing for your combat potions. Health potions, of course, you're going to want as much, but you want to be kind of vicious on this. Refreshing Healing Potion is probably going to be the one to use all the time, but Withering, Vitality, and Suspension of Spores has potential, but I just don't see it. And then you're going to want to use the Whetstones or Waitstones just to give you the extra attack power. Files, Glacial Fury, I think, is going to be there, but with Eye of the Storm being good in Mythic Plus, because you're going to get the extra stat, 150 for every enemy that has just hit you. That means your agility can spike through the roof. Glacial Fury does a good single target damage proc. Elemental Chaos basically boosts the secondary stat and gives a bonus effect. It's kind of RNG. Both of these files are a little bit RNG. The File of Eye of the Storm and any AoE counters, I think, are going to be really good. So that's going to kind of be where we're at. Gems, it's going to be, verse haste gems as you can get. Or if you're a jewel crafter like me, I can get 75 agility plus verse, which I'll probably be doing that for myself. Aromatic Seafood, giving you haste and verse is going to be the best one, because again, haste and verse generally are your best two stats. But once you get into raids and things like that, Hoard of Draconic Delicacies, or you start, doing your own cooking, going to be really good. 76 primary stat, much better than, 70 secondary stat. So this is going to be your best one overall, but this is going to be something that if you don't have a feast available, you're going to want to grab a bunch of these. So that's Consumables. Again, they're all here. This is on the Wildhead Guide, so definitely check that out as you can. So overall, Guardian Druid, I think, is one of the best tanks in Dragonflight right now. It wouldn't shock me if you see a number of them at the highest ends to be their Mark of the Wild buff, although Resto Druid is pretty good. Balanced Druid in raid situations is going to be fine. But Mark of the Wild in Mythic Plus scenarios is really, really powerful. You're talking 3% versatility with it on. It's just a massive amount of stat for a Mythic Plus group. So Guardian Druid, I think you could see being quite a bit used in high keys type situations. But if you're just someone that's looking to try to get as high of a weekly vault as you can, is going to push heroic raids, stuff like that, or even early to mid-level mythic rating, Guardian Druid, I think, is a fantastic choice. It's very sturdy, and a lot of really good tools to help itself and help, basically to help itself with the displacement tools and some of the mob control. Brings good party utility in a battle res. Stampeding Roar is a good mobility cooldown, and Mark of the Wild is a good 3% verse buff. It just has a lot of tools that can really be useful to a party overall. So Anyways, guys, that's the guide on Guardian Druid. I appreciate you sticking with me for this near 30-minute, actually a now 30-minute overview with the intro included. So I'm just going to end it here. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Until the next video, I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you're all enjoying yourselves. You're having fun. You keep on gaming. And I'll see you all in the Dragon Isles.